It was Jung who first used the word persona for the mask which hides our true self. He coined the word synchronicity for his theory of meaningful coincidence. With Freud, he alerted us to our complexes and made us aware of an unconscious dimension beneath concrete experience. He defined the unconscious thus.
Everything of which I know, but of which I'm not at the moment thinking. Everything of which I was once conscious, but have now forgotten. Everything perceived by my senses, but not noted by my conscious mind. Everything which, involuntarily and without paying attention to it, I feel, think, remember, want, and do. All future things that are taking shape in me, and will sometime come to consciousness. All this is the content of the unconscious.
The research comes to the question of the unconscious. There, things become necessarily blurred, because the unconscious is something which is really unconscious. And so you have no object, you see nothing. No. You only can make inferences, you know. And so we have to create a model of this possible structure of the unconscious, because we can't see it.
To this end, Jung developed the word association test, the most familiar of all psychological testing devices, which provided a means of locating what he chose to call a complex.
Kopf.
House.
The test requires the patient to say a word in immediate response to the doctor's stimulus word. The speed of response and the patient's pulse and respiration were measured at the same time. Jung's innovation was to consider why some test words cause patients to hesitate or to become anxious.
And then I began to study these places in the experiment where the attention or the capability, apparently, of the test person began to waver or to disappear. And I found soon out that it is matter of intimate personal affairs people were thinking of, or which were in them, even if they momentarily did not think of them, when they were unconscious, with other words, that nevertheless an inhibition came from the unconscious and hindered the expression in speech.
That's exactly the beginning of the whole development of Jungian psychology, when he did this word association test and discovered that there were strange interferences from somewhere else or somebody else in the way in which we try to react, to answer. And therefore, he began to call this a complex.
Fenster.
Often.
Much of what we had hitherto regarded as senseless was not as crazy as it seemed. More than once I have seen that even with such patients, there remains in the background a personality which must be called normal. It stands looking on, so to speak.
Arm.
Yes, that's right.
The polygraph or lie detector test is also derived from Jung's pioneering work. The word association test conclusively identified the existence of an unconscious voice, separate from a person's conscious mental processes.
What it reveals is that the physiology of the individual is a separate entity from the ego. So it's as though a second personality is standing behind me when I'm taking the lie detector test. And you ask me a question that I don't want to acknowledge, and I'll say no, and the man standing behind me will say, oh yes. That's what the physiological response does. So it tells us, just in irrefutable terms, that there is a second entity, second psychic center in the human psyche, and it's interested in truth.
Psychological truth is revealed in dreams, too, and in rituals like the annual Fassnacht. All over Switzerland, especially in Basel, Swiss order gives way to the disorder of the piccolos, the fifes and drums, the confusion and colour of a vivid Lenten carnival, a carnival of truth. Analyst Gerhard Adler.
It tells us the truth, that the real depths of the human psychology, this is usually hidden If you take the proverbially reticent Swiss, suddenly it breaks out. Suddenly it is something there that one wouldn't expect. But it is, of course, the truth. The Swiss are really very wild people.
For the proverbially reticent Swiss, Fassnacht is a license for misbehavior. Jung first encountered Fassnacht as a medical student in Basel, and later took some of his friends and pupils to witness firsthand this eruption of the national unconscious, revealing perhaps the true identity of the Swiss.
Well, true identity in an unconscious sense. They had a side to themselves or a layer to themselves, which usually didn't come out. And it wasn't this orgastic experience of the wild Fastnacht, where they could let themselves go.
I like the music and the whole love and skill and pain people take to create Fasnacht.
In Basel, dozens of studios are devoted to the painstaking craft of styling and painting new masks each year. Jung made the psychological observation that in daily life, in every culture, people wear a kind of mask, which he called our persona. The original meaning of the Latin word persona was an actor's mask.
So the persona is partially the result of the demands society has. And on the other side, it is a compromise with what one likes to be, or with what, or as one likes to appear, say. Yeah. Now, this is not the real personality, in spite of the fact that people will assure you that that is all quite real and quite honest, yet it is not. Now, such a performance, or say, yeah, the performance of the persona is quite all right as long as you know that you are not identical with the way in which you appear.
A ritual like Fassnacht allows the unconscious truth of the individual personality to emerge. At Fassnacht, everyone is masked. In their masks, they may insult their friends or colleagues by telling them the kinds of truths which for the rest of the year they might suppress. It is the opposite of the mask which we normally wear in order to take our place in the world.
We were masked all the time, and we had to get behind the mask. We had to realize that we had the mask. Persona was also, on the other hand, something necessary, because we can't jump with our true being at everybody. We have to be careful.
In the early hours, the streets are filled with the noise and images of a crowded dream. As day breaks, the masks and costumes can be seen more clearly. The carnival weaves its way through the streets like an impromptu congress of fairy tale characters. As the light comes up, so the dream fades. Masks are discarded or replaced by the more familiar mask of persona, allowing Basel's everyday business to resume for the morning as if nothing has happened. The Fassnacht main parade invades the streets later in the day. There are marching bands playing what is called googie music, a raucous brass cacophony played deliberately out of tune. The participants belong to cliques, which every year decide upon a theme for their masks, their lanterns, and the huge heads which lead the bands through the streets. Cliques may be formed from a group of friends, from professional groups like waiters or industrial scientists, and there are a number of all-women cliques. Local politics, ecology, television personalities, or elaborate cultural jokes are all pitched into the carnival of propaganda.
what is particularly interesting, I think, about the Basler Fasnacht is that there are so many so-called Wackis. The figure of the Wackis is the Alsatian peasant. They have a very earthy character, I should say, and very funny and, of course, very grotesque. And I have the impression nature here reminds psychically that actually we are peasants and should take care of the earth.
To Jung's grandson, Dieter Baumann, the Wackis reflect a lost sense of connection to the environment. To Jung, such ritualized performance expressed the true primitive unconscious beneath the technocratic persona of Switzerland and of Basel.
It is the spirit of the dead who become alive again. It's the ancestral spirit. One cannot really explain it, but an aspect is certainly that the unconscious comes out. And on one hand, it is a reconnection with the heathen past and with the natural past. And I think the Fasnacht is an unconscious religion.
We're going to have a lecture called Removing the Mask. It will not be too long. But it doesn't take long on Halloween or at a mask ball to pull the mask off, does it? Everybody says, surprise. First of all, if we're going to take a mask off, we have to take the mask off of something. And what are we going to unmask? In this case, we must perceive that there is something real about us. There is something also that is unreal about us. And the quicker we discover it and acknowledge it and learn to distinguish the difference, the quicker we will make progress in the light. Why is it important that we know the difference? It is important that we know the difference because otherwise we are going to be feeding the mask and starving the real man. Both men and women have the mask of human consciousness. And we spend a great deal of time and a great deal of energy in creating these masks, which we now decide we're going to remove. Someone may say, why should I? I've been pampering my ego all these years. Why in the world should I now decide that I'm going to quit pampering it? Well, there are many good reasons why we should. The main thing is that we must learn to overcome illusion because it has the word ILL in the front of it. You know what ILL means? It means ill. The mask is sick. That's why people are sick, because it's a phony creation. You and I may be a little bit askance sometime as we look at the bearded rebels that are now sprouting out in California and all over the country. Men who resent the times. They rebel against the type of life that we call conformism, and they go into what we call nonconformism. We must understand these poor people. They're not all as bad as they look. They have a mask. And they're sick and tired of the phoniness of the world. So they put another mask on. Some of them look like Santa Claus, and some look like the prophet Amos. But whatever the case may be, and we may laugh at it if we want to, it's all part of the masquerade that human beings indulge in. And we do a lot of it. We do an awful lot of it. In fact, we even sometimes fool ourselves.